The House will come to order. Calendar for the day. Yeah, I want to get on the right page. Oh, there it is. Okay, sorry. Calendar for the day. The first bill on the calendar for the day is House File Number 1717. The clerk will report the bill.
House File Number 1717, number 2 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to agriculture, making policy and technical changes to various agriculture-related provisions, the first engrossment.
The gentleman from Pope, Representative Anderson P.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Welcome to Ag Day here on the House floor this afternoon. We have the Ag Policy Bill up first. That'll be followed by the Ag Finance Bill this afternoon. As was stated, the Ag Policy Bill deals with the policy issues in agriculture. Some of the provisions of the bill are governor's requests dealing with the obsolete language, things such as that. We do those to ease regulation and to make statutes more clear. We also, in the bill, enable testing of advanced crop protection products. We clarify pest control regulations and multi-housing situations. Finally have some peace in the valley on that provision. We've been working on that for a number of years, but the folks came together this time around and have agreement there. We allow some inspection. There's some exciting technology in terms of small potatoes being produced in a laboratory. I believe it's out in Plymouth, Minnesota. And language changes to allow these potatoes to be used for seed and the regulation of that. And we also change and increase some of the eligibility requirements concerning loans in the Rural Finance Authority to keep up with the times and the inflation and such. Some of the particular bills.
Excuse me, Chair Anderson. Members, it's quite loud on the floor. We need to hear what Chair Anderson has to say, so please take your conversations to the alcove, or if you want to go to the retiring room, that's on you. Okay, thank you. Representative Anderson.
No comment. The bill also deals on some of the particular bills. We spent a lot of time the last couple of years looking at the Farmer Lender Mediation Program. That's a program that's been around since back in the 80s, 1986 to be exact, and it's been extended a number of times with no changes made to the provisions in the bill. And the changes we make in the bill in the lender mediation program have to do with just simply dealing with the keeping up with inflation with some of the numbers in that farmer lender mediation program. We make permanent the MEALC program. MEALC is Minnesota Ag Education Leadership Conference, an outstanding commission here in the state. They've been extended before, and we make that commission permanent. They deal mainly with ag education issues. We take a look at the dairy research provisions. That was a bill that I think I offered about 5 years ago, having to do with the dairy industry coming up with a research and education facility here in Minnesota. It hasn't gone as quickly as I had hoped, but they have agreement. There's been a committee meeting in the last couple of years, and they've agreed that the barn will be located, the facility will be located on the campus of the University of Minnesota. And the language called for this authority to actually purchase a location for the facility, and with it now being located at the university, they don't need to make any kind of a purchase, so we have to make some changes in the language of that bill and also extend that for another couple of years. And deals also some provisions with the Agri Fund and the agriculture research, fertilizer research program, things like that. So policy items and a good bill. There are some amendments, Mr. Chair. I look forward to discussion on the bill and the amendments. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I would stand for amendments.
There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Anderson P. moves to amend House File Number 1717, the first engrossment, and the amendment is coded A17-0327.
The gentleman from Pope, Representative Anderson P.
Thanks again, Mr. Speaker. This is strictly a technical amendment It makes a couple of changes in reference to a repealer or two. So again, a technical amendment, and I would appreciate a green vote on the amendment.
Discussion to the 0327 amendment. The gentleman, Representative Bly.
Thank you, Speaker. And I would concur with the author of the bill that this is a technical amendment and we should vote for it.
Further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Motion prevails. The 0327 amendment is adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. Clerk will report the amendment.
Anderson P. moves to amend House File Number 1717, the first engrossment as amended, and the amendment is coded A14.
The gentleman from Pope, Chairman Anderson P.
Thanks again, Mr. Speaker. This amendment deals with the Farmer Lender Mediation Program. One of the provisions that we have changed has to do with raising the threshold for the ability to qualify for mediation, and also the amount of money that a family can withdraw from their accounts for family living when they're into a mediation process. And the commission came back and recommended raising those based on inflation. So what we did, we went along with that. So every 5 years, they will take a look at that, the University Extension and the Department of Agriculture. And then they're going to have to come back to the legislature here to get approval to implement those increases if those are warranted. So what this amendment does simply is give the legislature the final approval if inflation increases are suggested or warranted by the inflation figures, the consumer price index and the agriculture index of cost of production, whatever those numbers are. After each 5 years, they would have to come back here to the legislature to get final approval, and I would encourage a green vote, Mr. Chair.
Discussion. The gentleman from Rice, Representative Bly.
Thank you, Speaker. And I want to compliment the Chair on his work on this particular issue, working with the task force and discussing how to make this Farmer Lender Mediation Program work. And I think this is a good amendment, and we should vote for it.
Discussion to the amendment. All in favor say aye. Opposed say nay. The motion is adopted on the A14 amendment. There's an amendment at the desk. Clerk will report the amendment.
Anderson P. moves to amend House File Number 1717, the first engrossment as amended, and the amendment is coded A16.
The gentleman from Pope, Representative Anderson P.
Love it. Thank you.
Thank you again, Mr. Speaker. This amendment, the A16, deals with a study that the Department of Ag was directed to do, and they gave a report back, I believe, in the past year, but it wasn't totally accurate in the sense that they came back and said that there were no pending nuisance lawsuits going on in the state at the time, when in fact there is one suit still in the court system up, I believe it's up in Todd County in Minnesota here. So we're asking them to update their study and come back with a report by February of the year 2022. And in addition to that, we are asking that the size limits on the nuisance ag lawsuit provisions in state law be lifted until the time that study has been completed in the year 2022, Mr. Speaker. And again, I would encourage a green vote.
Discussion. The gentleman from Rice, Representative Bly.
Thank you, Speaker. This is an amendment which I would encourage a red vote on. And the 2015 study, the chair is accurate that it did not reflect the current lawsuit, and I believe it's in Dodge County. And but what we're talking about with the change in the second part of this in the nuisance liability protection and raising the animal unit number or lifting it completely, that's a problem for many neighbors of farms like this. And although, I think the family farms who have gone down the path of having a larger livestock farm, may do well in working with their neighbors, may respect them. We are seeing an increasing number of farms coming in which with the plan of having very large animal units, and they may not live on the farm, they may not be there, and there's a great concern about how you interact. And this is really, we've seen over the years a taking away of citizen protections from this kind of agriculture. And and again, not that all of the farms are a problem. I think the low number of nuisance lawsuits in the state would indicate that there are not a lot of problems, but the potential of lifting that and making it more difficult for citizens to really protect their own rights. And if it should happen that they feel threatened, their health might be threatened or their livelihood might be threatened, this is one way for them to protect themselves. And I guess I would caution lifting that. I think the study is fine. The Department of Ag tells me they'll have to spend about $50,000 to complete the study, but it may still be worthwhile to do that. And I would like to call for a roll call on this amendment.
Roll call. I'm going to request are the 15 hands, seeing 15 hands. There will be a roll call. Discussion. The gentleman from Brown, Chairman Torkelson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I rise in support of this amendment. To judge livestock facilities based on their size is absolutely inappropriate. Large livestock animal unit operations are already very highly regulated, and these nuisance lawsuits can be applied unreasonably, and I strongly support the Anderson amendment.
The gentleman from Martin, Chairman Gunther.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Animal agriculture is over 50% of agriculture in Minnesota. Animal agriculture is important. You got Hormel, you got all these companies as well as those producing livestock. 1/3 of the grain we produce in Minnesota is used for feeding animal agriculture. I think there is protection in this bill for nuisances. There is protection for a larger feedlot. It's got the same protections and the same bars that a smaller unit does. There is no difference. I think to say that a larger barn stinks worse than a smaller barn hasn't borne out at all. And if it does, a person has the right of action. And if it's a new facility, they get 2 years to have action against that producer in any way you want to do it, for any reason. For odor alone, there is a lifetime that they can say this feedlot is violating the odor standards and should be either have to fix its house up or cease to exist. I think supporting this amendment is very important, and I certainly favor the A16 amendment. Green, please.
Discussion. The gentleman from Ramsey, Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members, I think that there is general agreement in the body regarding one part of the amendment, but quite a bit of controversy regarding another. And so, Mr. Speaker, I move to divide the amendment at line 1.11 after the word policy and the period, but before the term notwithstanding.
Representative Pinto, in the opinion of the Speaker, it would be divisible there. Which would you like to take first?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to take the first part of the amendment first in that case.
Members, we're looking at down to line 1.11, after policy period would be the first amendment. To the first amendment. The gentleman from Rice, Representative Bly.
I would remove the roll call on this part of the amendment.
Okay, are there 15 hands? Seeing 15 hands, we will remove the roll call. Discussion. Discussion to the amendment through line 111 after agriculture policy period. Discussion. The gentleman from Pope, Chairman Anderson P.
Mr. Speaker, I would also encourage a green vote on this part of the amendment.
Further discussion. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. Motion prevails. Now to the second part of the amendment, Representative Pinto, the gentleman from Ramsey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, members, regarding the second portion then, so we're going to have a study that's going to be performed. We just voted on that. The second part of the amendment then has to do with a provision in statute that's a right that Minnesotans have had since at least 1905. I'm looking at the provision of 1905 that allows anyone who is experiencing something injurious to health, indecent, offensive to the senses, etc., to get some relief for that. So in this particular example, particular circumstance, we're talking about a family that has had a farm that has moved in after that family is living in the community, and they're experiencing a nuisance from that particular farm, maybe operated by another family in town, by someone else. But the point is, in that family's home, there's the odor from the farm. There's something which the family's experiencing, which is a nuisance, which can be a real concern. Now, some time ago, there was a carve-out from the nuisance provision for smaller farms, to encourage smaller family farms to have an exemption from this. Members, it seems to me that, that this is not something that we want to do to expand for any kind of farm. The concern is, if you are that family living in that community and that farm opens up next to you, shouldn't you have a right to be protected in your own home from the odor from that farm? Shouldn't you have some kind of relief that you can get? Members, there is not, my understanding is there's no regulation, state or federal, regarding odor. There are for a couple of compounds that are out there, hydrogen sulfide, methane, but there are many other compounds which can cause an odor from farms. And so the concern is, if you're in that family, what kind of relief do you have? You can't bring a lawsuit to get protection from that. You can't sell to somebody else. Who's going to buy your home when you're next to this farm with that odor? So members, we should not be making a change. We made an exception for smaller farms, fair enough. We should not extend that to have no limit for the size of the farm. If your family is experiencing these odors in your home, in your castle, your home, in the inside of your home, seems like we want to provide that family the same relief we provide to families throughout Minnesota and have since at least 1905. We should vote against this amendment. Thank you.
Discussion. The lady from Hennepin, Representative Hillstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will Representative Anderson yield to a question?
The gentleman will yield. The lady from Hennepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Anderson, there is currently a case pending in court. What impact would this amendment, if it became law, have on that case?
The gentleman from Pope, Chairman Anderson P.
I believe this would not have any impact on a case currently in the court system. Representative Hillstrom.
The lady from Hennepin, Representative Hillstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Anderson, is it your intention that this should not have any impact on a pending case?
The gentleman from Pope, Chairman Anderson P.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. Yes, it is. We tried a bill similar to this a couple of years ago, which had language that would affect cases currently pending, and quickly found out that was not the right way to go. So this legislation would not affect current cases, and that is the intention of this amendment, Representative.
The lady from Hennepin, Representative Hillstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. At this point with this amendment, what you're doing is you're choosing which person in your community should have the protection under the law? Should the person who owns the property next to the farm have the ability to protect their right to enjoy their property? Or should the person who is producing the odor have the ability to protect their operation at the expense of the property rights of the neighbor? Members, I think at this moment, given the pending litigation that's happening, I think we should not adopt the amendment.
The discussion. The gentleman from Dakota, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Parliamentary inquiry.
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
Mr. Speaker, is there currently a roll call on this second section?
There is not. There is because, okay, there is.
I just wanted to make sure, Mr. Speaker. I do
There
have
either
a...
is or there isn't. And there is.
Is there? Mr. Speaker, and there's been some discussion here about whether there's litigation or not. I think when we have these types of debate, we also get a picture of everything is awesome out there. Everything is awesome where there's not going to be any problems. It's just these agitators that come around, and maybe they're from another state, or maybe they're from somewhere else that's raising an issue. But when they're your neighbor, and I think that's what the case is here, it's your neighbor. And in the city, we can have neighbor issues. But what we're talking about here are businesses. Businesses, agriculture is a business, farming is a business. And providing a shield for those rare, and I somewhat believe where Representative Gunther is coming from, I think there's a rare situation where these things occur, but they do occur. So providing a shield for those exceptions is not what we should be doing here. We should provide Minnesotans the opportunity for relief if they're harmed. And I don't think most farmers, I don't think most livestock operators are going to be doing harm, but there might be some, or there might be one. And that's what we're talking about here, trying to shield the bad actors with this broad amendment. And I would encourage a no vote on the amendment.
Discussion, and members, we're on the second portion of the amendment from line 1.11 after agricultural policy period 2 and through line 1.16. The gentleman from Cottonwood, Chairman Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, would Representative Pinto please yield for a question?
The gentleman will yield. The gentleman from Cottonwood, Chairman Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Pinto, could you please share with the body once again who currently falls under the protection of this law?
The gentleman from Ramsey, Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think I guess I need to clarify, Representative Hamilton, you're talking about the law which exempts small farms from the nuisance suit, if that's your question.
The gentleman from Cottonwood. Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm talking about the law as it states currently, and it's not just small farms, Representative Pinto, into the body. It's also very large farms too. If you're a publicly traded company, if you're a corporate farm here in Minnesota, you have protection under the law as it states currently. So both small farms and very large farms as well, publicly traded companies, are protected under this law. All we're asking for is equal application of this law for other farms as well. You know, whether you're a medium-sized family farm or a large family farm, that everybody has the same protection underneath this law. That's what we're asking for. And you know, in the Ag Committee, basically we have one rule for testifiers. When they come in, we say, please, we will not tear down one segment of agriculture trying to promote another. We're all in this thing together. You know, in the Ag community, a lot of times I've been critical because there's a lot of us versus us. You know, whether we're debating food versus fuel or large versus small or urban versus rural. or conventional versus traditional, GMOs versus organics. I'm saying we're all in this together. We are all in this together. You know, this does not exempt people from bringing lawsuits. You can still bring a lawsuit if a new farm is put up. You have that 2-year opportunity to do so. And so again, this is equal application of the law currently. Currently, it protects, like you said, the small family farms, absolutely, but also the large farms too, if they're publicly traded companies that we have in this state as well. And so again, we want equal application of the law. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Hamilton. Chair Hamilton, I think what I referenced was small farms, and what I meant by that, and my apologies if that was a mischaracterization, simply we're talking about farms that have 1,000, under 1,000 swine or 2,500 cattle. And I guess the point is, whether you want to call that small, medium, large, we're now talking about extending it to even larger, right? I guess the point is, however, I wasn't trying to make a distinction between different ownership. I guess I mentioned that at one point, but the main point, Mr. Chair, is that for whatever reason, an exemption was made from our nuisance laws quite a while back now for the farms that are listed in that particular size, however you'd like to characterize them. We're now saying that even larger farms they should apply to, even if that family has moved in first, the family's living there, this farm opens up. And my point is that the exemption that was made, and nobody's calling to eliminate the exemption for farms below that certain level, it's simply saying for farms that are that much bigger, I think perhaps we want to be making sure to side with that family that's having their private property rights violated. I know we're very respectful of private property rights, as we all are. The family in that situation that has that odor inside of their house, in their kitchen, in their living room, in their home, should have the right to at least be able to seek some relief through this. Thank you.
Discussion. The gentleman from Blue Earth, Chairman Cornish.
Mr. Speaker and members, I love it when you city folks get up and talk to us about what we should be doing on the farm. I wonder if you know the difference between a gilt, a barrow, a sow, a gestation barn, or a finishing barn. If you ever lived on a farm, some of you say you drove by a farm. My grandparents were a farm. That doesn't mean diddly. Here you're talking about business, and I wonder if you folks hate agriculture, especially, or if it's just like any other businesses that you don't like. Representative Lesh got up and started lecturing us the other day on why farms get bigger and consolidation. I never heard that wacky explanation before, and now you get up, Representative Pinto, and lecture us on farm matters, and you called them rare. No, they're not rare at all. Down in southern Minnesota, the township wanted to ban farms completely, anything to do with swine. Up in northern Minnesota, I've got a constituent that spent $1 million from trivial lawsuits. This is just a disguise by the wackos in the Humane Society that come after farmers. And they do it with dust complaints. They do it with odor complaints. They dream up of somebody 1 mile away that has an allergy all of a sudden and can't stand the odor. So this is an attack on agriculture. Feel comfortable on voting with the farmers, you folks. Don't be scared of this scare tactics in this recorded vote. Let's not be like the Democrat Party today. Let's vote for business and for farmers.
The gentleman from Ramsey, Representative Lesh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Wow, Representative Cornish, I can't believe I got to speak after that. And after the exhortations about preemptions, about what we can do in the city, you are amazed that city folks can have something to say about nuisance, be it on a farm or something else. I'm floored. Thank you for that. I'm impressed. I'll remember. But, Mr. Speaker, I'm wondering if Representative Anderson P. would yield to a couple of questions.
The gentleman from Pope will yield. The gentleman from Ramsey, Representative Lesh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Anderson, so I wonder if you could tell me, other than odor that's been talked about, are there other types of nuisance like overspray of chemicals or water runoff or dust that would be impacted by this?
The gentleman from Pope, Chairman Anderson P.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. And Representative Lesh, to my knowledge, I don't think so, no.
The gentleman from Ramsey, Representative Lesh.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Anderson. And not to school anyone on the law, because apparently that offends some people, but yes, any other type of nuisance would be affected. So whether it's not just odor, but it's runoff or it's dust or something else, all those are nuisance which have been recognized in the common law since before Minnesota was a state, and are recognized in state common law, and also have been codified for Minnesota since 1905. We've recognized this forever, the principles of nuisance. It's one of the last lines of defense that you have if an operation comes in and starts something up, and that wasn't what it was like when you bought the land. And you know, speaking of city stuff, I mean, yeah, whether you're talking about gun ranges in Maplewood or overflights in South Minneapolis, yeah, there's some stuff that was there before you moved in. Okay, and so there's some situations where you knew that was there when you moved in. But that's not what this is. What you're talking about is saying someone can move in next to you, and whether it's runoff or whether it's odor or whether it's anything else that causes a nuisance. That's who you're impacting by this, people who were there. I got another question, Mr. Speaker, to Representative Anderson. Yield the question.
The gentleman will yield. The gentleman from Ramsey, Representative Lesh.
Okay, Mr. Speaker and Representative Anderson, if one of these issues, whether it's runoff or dust or odor, you live in your house for 20 years, someone moves in next to you, and let's say you're like the typical good Minnesotan, where you're not angling for a lawsuit right away. And that 2-year honeymoon period goes real fast because you rely on the fact that they say they're going to take care of it, and you don't want to be a litigious person. You don't even want to be an argumentative person. You want to be a Minnesotan. So all of a sudden it's gone. And then you can't bring a claim. And then you can't sell your farm or your property because no one will buy it. And the new farm operation, it's a huge nuisance. What happens to my property as a farmer if I can't sell it because the stench or the runoff or the dust or some other impact from that operation from out of state is impacting my property value as a Minnesota farmer? What then happens to my property?
The gentleman from Pope, Chairman Anderson P.
Mr. Speaker and members, thank you. Little clarification here, and again, I'm not a lawyer, but this amendment does not pertain to the siting of a livestock facility. So the case you're bringing up is that if you lived here for X number of years and a facility were to move in, there is a whole process or series of regulations. You have to meet federal, state, local, county, township zoning ordinances which would deal with what you're talking about in terms of location and setbacks and such. So this deals with the operation of that facility after it's up and going. And again, there's that 2-year presumption of operation. And in my opinion, that should be taken care of in the permitting process up to when that facility is built. And to say that you simply can't sell your property, I think that's an oversimplification. I've heard of the suit up in Todd County where somebody wanted to move out. They did move out. They sold their home, and they were able to make a switch. So I don't think it's fair to say you can't sell your property. And again, the location thing should be taken care of in the preliminary siting process at the state, county, and local level.
Oh, well,
The gentleman from Ramsey, Representative Lesh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Representative Anderson. I wasn't asking you whether thought the question was a fair question. I asked you a hypothetical of what happened if you were counting on a certain price for your farm. Maybe you're not underwater, but barely over. My question was what happened? What would happen if you couldn't, or the property value was too low? Now, I'll tell you a story as a city slicker, 612 or city it, whatever, okay? I remember one of my first jobs out of law school. and I was working for the St. Paul City Council. And I remember the first day that I started that job, because the day that I started that job was the Monday after the ethanol plant down on West 7th went into operation. Anyone remember that? Yeah, it was a great idea, right? We're going to produce ethanol in the city. It would file under seemed like a good idea at the time, okay? Well, my phone was ringing off the hook for weeks from people who didn't like the smell. Now, I actually didn't mind the smell that much. I mean, it guess depends on the day. I mean, it smelled like baking bread to me. It wasn't that big of a deal. But let me tell, and everyone smells things differently, right? Everyone has a little bit different sensitivity or smells like something different. But there were a lot of people who were outraged, and they had this fine dust. You could come out, you could see it on the hood of their car. There's the dust. You could draw pictures in and stuff from the ethanol plant, depending on which way the wind was blowing. And they put it in the middle of the city. Now, I grant a lot of you folks who live in rural parts of the state or around ethanol plants, you'll see this, but you're miles away. You had a concentration of a lot of people in that neighborhood. And that ethanol operation, Representative Anderson, followed all the regulatory rules. It went through the process. It had open hearings for people to come in and weigh in on it. But these were regular folks, just like folks in greater Minnesota. They were in a fantastic position to know what it was going to be like after that. They had no idea. Now, eventually, that ethanol plant ended up closing up shop because people caused them so many kinds of problems, and it wasn't a viable operation in light of the location where it was at. But all the song and dance I hear from that side of the aisle about how we need less regulation, and now I hear, no, don't worry about it. The regulations we have in place are enough in order to protect people's property rights. All you who profess to care about property rights, you say, no, all those regulations are in place. Meanwhile, while you're trying to undo the regulations, I can't figure out which one it is. So that was my question originally, and Representative Anderson, you gave your answer that no, you think there's enough regulation and you think it's unfair to suggest that property values would drop out. I wonder if you would have met one of those constituents down on West 7th Street about 15, 16 years ago and tell them, don't worry about it, you'll be able to sell your house just fine, when they got a realtor sign in the front yard and people are coming in on that Saturday with an overwhelming smell of what some would describe as a stench. It doesn't work that way. And the last line of defense that these people have is a nuisance suit. And you want to take that away from them, suggesting, no, 2 years is plenty of time to go after them. The average Minnesotan, especially in a more rural, sparsely populated area of the state, they're looking around. Is anyone with me on this? Well, I guess I'll wait to see if they'll get their act together. And they don't. I guarantee you that out-of-state operation that comes in, they got their thumb on the stopwatch. They know when that 2 years is coming up. I wish all of you that said you cared about private property rights, especially of farmers, I wish you walked the talk when it came to a bill like this.
The lady from Polk, Representative Keel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The conversation started between Representative Anderson and the question I was going to ask. Well, my question is, how do you start a barn? How do you add to? I have a neighbor. He's a young man who retired from the Army. He has joined the farm. He's the third generation on the existing farm. It's a 5-generation farm. And he wants to join the farm. Well, when you add more families, you expand. This happens to be a hog operation along with other crops. And the young man is looking to expand his farm, and so he does all the filing that Representative Anderson just approached, that there is requirements that they have to do. There's public comment. There is an existing farm already. And I happened into this conversation because I was in DNR one day, and he was telling me about this farm, this young man wanting to expand. And I said, well, there's already hogs there. Oh, no, he says, there's not. Can't smell them. There's no hogs in this area at all. Never seen them. And I said, really? Well, I'm pretty sure I've been there. And there's 4,000 head of hogs already. And he said, oh no, I had to smell them. And another gentleman came in and said, oh yeah, he said, there's quite a farm there. Yes, there's odor once in a while, you bet. They open the barns, they clean them out, they spread the manure. By the way, that should increase the neighbor's value if you want to help add some nitrogen to the grass. They don't do it on yarns, I'm just kidding. It's knifed in. But when people want to expand, we're talking about small farms, folks. This is not big. I know 4,000 heads sounds like a lot, but if you start from farrowing to finishing, there's a constant cycle, and those farms ebb and flow because of different issues. But farmers are very adept at handling their livestock, and rarely do you hear a lot of challenges. And you know what? I tell this to a lot of people. You have a problem with your neighbor? Go sit down and talk to him. I'll bet you anything they are trying to figure out or handle some issue that is existing already. And I am very much in support of Representative Anderson's bill. I think this is very important for our rural areas and for the fact that we want to keep agriculture going. And as we see young people come back into the farm, these things will ebb and flow, but they're an important part of the financial part of the farm when we can use livestock as well as crops to keep a balance within our agricultural society. Thank you.
Discussion. The gentleman from Pope, Chairman Anderson P.
Thank you again, Mr. Speaker, and for the discussion of this amendment today. Again, just to be clear, this does not change the underlying way this law works. It just extends the protection to operations of all sizes in Minnesota. It's fair to all sized operations. And again, the permitting that still is in effect, we have zoning and setbacks and such like that, operational rules, state and federal. We have county conditional use permits. And on the operations over 1,000 head, they still must apply for an EAW and get either an NPDES permit or the state SDS permit. So there are things in place to ensure that these operations are run very well.
The gentleman from Rice, Representative Bly.
Thank you, Speaker. And I disagree with you somewhat, Representative Anderson. You are changing the way the law is structured. And there's a reason that it was structured in the way that it was, where a certain number of animal units would be exempt, and then above that, there would be a chance for neighbors to pursue a lawsuit. And I don't know that things have changed enough that we should take that away from citizens and neighbors. I don't think that there's abuse of this. If we have one lawsuit that's in operation, I don't see that we're having frivolous lawsuits brought forward. I think neighbors are thoughtful about this. I do think that, I represent a rural district as well. I have farmers in my district. Some of the concerns are brought by neighboring farmers. It's not just city folks who are concerned about this. So I'm cautious about moving away from this without really exploring this further. And I think let's go ahead and do the study, and let's see how the study comes down and talks about it. I think we're kind of putting the cart before the horse here by making a change in the way the law works before we know. And so I would recommend, again, a red vote on this amendment.
Discussion. The representative from Traverse, Representative Backer.
Yes, speakers and members, as several of you know, I live in a very rural district. I have visited a lot of these farms. And when you walk in the farms, it's not like your grandfather's farms when there's flies and other things. Our farmers do a tremendous job of keeping the smell down. I live downstream from a swine farm. It's just part of life out there. It's like in the metro area, you get used to the traffic. out there. You get used to working with your neighbors and so forth. And if I have a problem, I go up the hill and we talk and we figure things out. We don't always have to do things by paper and pencil. Go talk to your neighbor. And I support this amendment from Representative Anderson.
Discussion. Members, we're voting on the second portion of the A16 amendment. The clerk will take the roll on the second portion. The clerk will close the roll. There being 76 ayes and 55 nays, the second portion of the A16 amendment is adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Newberger moves to amend House File Number 1717, the first engrossment as amended, and the amendment is coded A17-0353.
The gentleman from Sherburne, Representative Newberger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I do have an amendment to the amendment. Did we want to take that up first, or do you
There
want me to...
is an amendment to the amendment. The clerk will report the amendment to the amendment.
Newberger moves to amend his amendment to House File Number 1717, the first engrossment as amended, and the amendment to the amendment is coded RA 17-008.
The gentleman from Sherburne, Representative Newberger, to the amendment to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, the amendment to the amendment is a simple technical fix. It adds one more category, and I'll be more than happy to expound on that when we get to the amendment. It adds the word or the category of individuals.
Discussion to the amendment to the amendment. All in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. The amendment to the amendment is adopted. The gentleman from Sherburne, Representative Newberger, to the amended amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this amendment, the A17, just builds on the good bipartisan work that we did with last session. It deals with the cottage foods industry. Senator Dibble and I worked real hard on this. We had really good support from both sides of the aisle. Currently, right now, the folks that are in the cottage foods industry, these are people that just bake stuff in their homes and they sell it to earn some extra income. There's all kinds of safety mechanisms that we created for this. But there's one thing they could not do, members. They were not allowed to donate to charities or to any organization that's trying to raise money. We sat down with all the stakeholders. We sat down with the department. We put this amendment together that would simply allow these people to sell their products or to donate their products for community events, educational, charitable, and religious organizations if they're trying to raise some money. It's a good amendment, members, and I'll stand for questions.
Discussion to the amended amendment. The gentleman from Rice, Representative Bly.
Thank you, Speaker. And Representative Newberger is right. He's worked hard on this. It does have bipartisan support. There are constituents of mine who really applaud the work that he's done. He's worked very hard on it, and I think we should vote for this amendment.
The gentleman from Pope, Chairman Anderson P.
Mr. Speaker, members, vote green.
Further discussion. All those in favor of the amended amendment, please say aye. Those opposed, please say nay. The motion prevails. The amended amendment is adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Knobloch moves to amend House File Number 1717, the first engrossment as amended, and the amendment is coded A15.
The gentleman from Stearns, Chairman Knobloch.
Mr. Speaker, members, this amendment deals with the state's partition fence law. As many know, we have had a partition fence law on the books, actually in one form or another, since territorial days. As it is right now, it requires any two parcels of 20 acres or more. If one owner wants to have a fence, it requires the other owner to pay for half the fence. Or if there is a fence and the fence needs to be maintained, one owner can force the other owner to pay for half the cost of the fence. And I have had multiple constituents over the years talk to me about this and complain about what they feel is the injustice of the law. Interestingly enough, this law applies everywhere in the state except for one county. Back in the early 1990s, there was a individual, coincidentally from St. Cloud, who owned land in St. Louis County, and this person decided to get into the cattle raising business and informed their neighbor that he would be putting up a fence and they would be paying for half the cost of the fence. And that neighbor, a certain Blandon Paper Company, said, "We will see you in court." And they did, and the court ruled that the Minnesota fence law was an unconstitutional taking because Blandon Paper Company received no benefit from having to pay for half the cost of the fence. So what was the reaction of the legislature? We passed a law that said in St. Louis County, the law was different. And there, in St. Louis County, you only had to pay for that portion of the fence that you received as a benefit. Whatever percentage it was deemed was the benefit of your fence. But everywhere else in the state, we still require that a new fence be split 50-50 if one side demands it. What this amendment does, and I have worked on this amendment with the various agriculture groups. You should see coming out a letter from the Cattlemen's Association, a letter from the Minnesota Farmers Union. I believe I also have support of the Minnesota Farm Bureau. What this amendment does is it clarifies the fence law so that you only are required to split the cost of the fence if there are livestock on each parcel on either side of the fence. This narrows it considerably. No longer can you be assessed for half the cost of your fence if your neighbor decides to go into the cattle business or some other livestock business. It would only apply, and it would apply throughout the state in St. Louis County as well, to situations where each parcel is over 20 acres and each owner or each property had livestock on it. And I would stand for questions.
Discussion. The gentleman from Dakota, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and would Representative Knobloch yield for a question?
The gentleman will yield. The gentleman from Dakota, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Knobloch. I just want to walk through a potential situation here. So if I'm adjoining your land, you have livestock, I have CRP, you would pay, under current law, you and I would meet in the middle, and we would pay each of us half. If Representative Knobloch would yield.
Representative Knobloch.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Hansen, yes, that is my understanding of the current law, that underneath current law, you would pay for half of the fence.
Gentleman from Dakota, Representative Hansen.
And Mr. Speaker and Representative Knobloch, if this passes and you have livestock and I have CRP and we meet in the middle, you would now pay all.
The gentleman will yield. The gentleman from Stearns, Chairman Knobloch.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Hansen, yes.
The gentleman from Dakota, Representative Hansen.
Thank you.
Discussion. To the A15 amendment, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. The motion prevails. The amendment, the A15 amendment, is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Bly moves to amend House File Number 1717, the first engrossment as amended, and the amendment is coded A9.
The gentleman from Rice, Representative Bly.
Thank you, Speaker. This amendment deals with the farmer-lender mediation, and there's a a minimum number that allows someone to enter into the mediation, and it was $5,000, and it's raised in this bill to $15,000. Speaking with the farmers union groups and others, they encouraged me to suggest perhaps a $10,000 would be a better number. They're looking at things that are happening in the agricultural economy and worried about raising it too high too quickly might be a problem. I want to compliment the chair on his work on this issue again, working with the task force and really, I think, making improvements and also doing away with the renewing the mediation. So I'm hopeful that the chair will consider this amendment a good one and encourage a green vote on it.
Discussion to the A9 amendment. The gentleman from Pope, Chairman Anderson P.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Bly, I appreciate your amendment. I'm going to have to ask for a no vote on this one. This is something we've worked on for a couple, 3 years and really looked at it. We established the commission to come back, and they said if you do raise it up to the amount of inflation, which I think technically was $13,800 is what the figure going from 1986 to today would be in terms of inflated value. And I went with 15,000 to get a round number. And I want to stay with that. And I just want to explain to the body what's happened in terms of farm expenses over the past 30, 35 years. Back in 1986, seed corn sold for probably, I'm guessing, $30, $40, $50 a bag for a bag of seed corn. And with that $5,000, you could buy approximately 100 bags of seed corn if they were $50 a bag. Today, seed corn costs your newer top hybrids well over $300 a bag. So with that same $5,000, you could purchase 16 bags of corn. The dollar just doesn't go as far today as it did back in 1986. The price of land. Back in the 80s, average farmland probably sold for ballpark $500 an acre. You could buy 10 acres of land with that $5,000. Today, you're lucky to buy 1 acre of land with that $5,000 of good, prime, productive Minnesota farmland. So inflation has really taken place on the farm scene. And what we're trying to do is just bring the numbers up to the 21st century. And I've talked with the folks from the University Extension, and they are okay with this increase. And they also added that the number in that $5,000 category may not totally be the exact right number because somebody could have a couple, 2 or 3 loans, one smaller and one bigger. So in some cases, they're actually being counted twice if they have a loan in that small category. I also find it interesting that we made 2 changes in the dollar amounts in the mediation program. This was one. The other one raised the amount of family living money that could be pulled out of the operation for a family to live on during this mediation process. And the old figure back from 1986 was, I believe, $1,600, and we raised that to $3,800, again, a substantial increase. So if we're going to be fair and lower the threshold, we should also probably lower the family living expense, and I don't want to do that either. So I would encourage a red vote on the amendment and to keep the figure for the threshold at $15,000 for the farmer lender mediation.
Discussion to the amendment. The gentleman from Rice, Representative Bly.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you, Chair Anderson, for your information. My concern is that I think agriculture is very diverse. We've heard Representative Hamilton, Chair Hamilton, talk many times about how we want everything to succeed. And not every farmer out there is a corn farmer, and there are vegetable farmers and others who have different expenditures and other things to consider. So I'm just concerned that we don't leave out folks who have a different circumstance. I don't want to move too quickly. And you mentioned the other provision that is in the bill, which you've made, and I thank you for that. I think that was a very wise change and appreciate that. I'd like to have a roll call on the amendment. Thank you.
Roll call having requested. Are there 15 hands? Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call to the A9 amendment. The clerk will take the roll on the A9 amendment. Members, please vote. The clerk will close the roll. There being 57 ayes and 75 nays, the A9 amendment is not adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Hansen moves to amend House File Number 1717, the first engrossment as amended, and the amendment is coded A22.
The gentleman from Dakota, Representative Hansen, to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, if you take a look at the A22 amendment, I think it's important to note what this is about. This is a moratorium, and I did have a bill that I introduced for a moratorium on so the Board of Animal Health would not register new farm-raised whitetail deer farms. It does not say elk. It does not say shut down existing farms. It says that you don't expand. There wouldn't be new ones. I want to be clear, you could expand your existing, but there wouldn't be new ones. And it would go into place until January 1st, 2020. Members, if you took a look at the Star Tribune recently, you would see that in Fillmore County, in the Speaker's home area, the sharpshooters found a deer, shot a deer in the CWD, the chronic wasting disease area, whose ears were notched. Chronic wasting disease is a big issue. It's a big issue in many states, and it hasn't been able to get a foothold here. In Minnesota, right now, there are 319 whitetail deer farms. What my amendment would say is that there wouldn't be 320 or 21 or 22 or more. On those farms, there are 5,737 animals, give or take. We have over 450,000 deer hunters who get a license each year. 450,000. It is a huge part of our economy. Wherever you are in the state, whether you're in the north or the south, the east or the west, there are deer hunters and there's deer hunting. And the impact, if chronic wasting disease gets established, like it has been in other states, is going to severely impact that economy. So yesterday we had a discussion about responding to invasive species. Think about chronic wasting disease as an invasive species. And that we should try to take a containment strategy for potential vectors that could move the disease. So I ask for your support for the A22 amendment and I ask for a roll call.
Roll call having requested are the 15 hands, seeing 15 hands. There will be a roll call. The gentleman from Pope, Chair Anderson P.
Thanks again, Mr. Speaker, members, and I would ask for a red vote on the amendment. We met just a week or so ago with the Servaday folks at a MOHA meeting, and this is a very highly regulated industry. We learned there that there is a mandatory inspection of every animal on all of these farms. They have to report the movement, any type of movement, to the Board of Animal Health within 14 days. They have to have 2 IDs, and what amazed me was any time a cervid animal dies, whether from natural causes or if they're going to be slaughtered for meat, the animal must be inspected. So it's a highly regulated industry, part of Minnesota's agriculture, and I would have a little trouble with trying to say we're going to put the brakes on them and not let them expand any further in terms of numbers of farms, which this amendment would do. So again, I would recommend a red vote.
Discussion. The gentleman from Candy Ojai, Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members, and I agree with Chair Anderson. This is a bad vote, and I would urge the members to say no to this amendment. When I was out visiting my friends and neighbors in Candy Ojai County this summer, in fact, the first time I ran for office 3 summers ago, I went to a beautiful farm, white-tailed deer farm with Steve and Melissa Yucatel. In fact, they're here today watching this conversation above us in the seating area upstairs, and I'm very embarrassed we're talking about limiting their ability to be able to expand and grow. They have been doing this for only 4 or 5 years. They're growing. They see a need. They see a market. Please, members, do not allow a potential dangerous thing. That means we should never allow turkeys to expand because of the avian flu epidemic. That means we should be careful not to do something because the what ifs and the how comes. So, members, I do ask for a red vote on this as well. We need to support all industries in rural Minnesota. In my area, Crow River Whitetails is a great business and they want to grow. I would hope for a red vote. Thank you.
Discussion to the 822 amendment. Representative Lueck.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Really need to look hard at this. I definitely urge a no vote on this amendment. If we stop and think, in Minnesota, how long is deer hunting season? It's 2 weeks. 2 weeks. And that's up in our part of the state. Other places it's a week or less. So we're going to start the road down to try to destroy an industry, an agriculture industry here in Minnesota. That's just not the way to go. Not the way to go. I'm an avid deer hunter myself, belong to the Deer Hunters Association. But this is another example of dividing, putting one group against another instead of trying to solve the problem. Again, this should be a no vote, and just let's stop this nonsense.
Discussion. The gentleman from Wright, Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, I too oppose this amendment. Last year, there was 25% less deer that were shot in the state of Minnesota, and hunting was down 6%. And as the youths continue to grow up and not be active in the outdoors, that's a shame. And I know the DNR and many folks in this chambers on both sides have been working very hard to ensure that a younger generation are loving the outdoors and picking up fishing and hunting. Many of the hunters have hunted for years, and it's a family tradition. This amendment here would further erode the hunting family traditions and the hunting in the state of Minnesota. So again, 25% less deers last year and 6% less hunters. That's not good for Minnesota. I thought we were a Minnesota one. Well, we're not if this amendment goes through. So Representative Hansen, it's a horrible amendment. It ought to be shot down.
Discussion. The gentleman from Dakota, Representative Hansen, to your amendment.
Well, members and Minnesotans, I encourage you to pay attention closely to what's said. Again, Representative Baker, I explicitly said this would not prohibit any expansion. It prohibits new farms. The theme from the other side is always condescension to anyone who disagrees with them. It was. That if, so where's Representative Cornish? Representative Cornish alluded that folks in the Metro don't know what they're talking about, so therefore they shouldn't talk about it. I think the Speaker knows. I think some of you know where I grew up and how I grew up. I know Representative Cornish knows. So every time there's an issue that comes up like this, frankly, Representative McDonald, where are those hunters going to go if they can't shoot any deer? The deer are all sick. We're going to watch the licenses plummet. We're going to watch the tourism plummet. And so it's a prudent measure to say, take a pause, don't expand. Now, if we want to talk about folks in the gallery, yesterday there were folks in the gallery who were deer hunters. There's probably folks in the gallery right now that are deer hunters. But 319 whitetail deer farms, 450,000 Minnesotans that deer hunt. We're not saying close those farms. We're not saying you can't expand. We're saying no new farms until 2020, until we get a handle on this. But the answer is, nope, you don't know what you're talking about. You can't talk about this stuff. You're dividing by raising a question and raising, frankly, a way that medicine and disease control is dealt with. Containment, treatment, containment, diagnosis. The existing model of regulation was a battle, and people warned that it wasn't going to work, and now it hasn't. So we'll be back again talking about this, and I anticipate we're going to be back talking about millions of dollars spent for dealing with the outbreak as it expands. More public money, probably from the deer hunter licenses or the Game and Fish Fund. Public money continuing to spend with the consequences of this. I expect we'll probably have requests for public money for double fencing. We'll probably have requests for public money for the industry. And the dollars will roll. Again, because it'll be anybody who raises any questions, you don't know what you're talking about.
The gentleman from Cottonwood, Chairman Hamilton.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the member from South St. Paul, you know, I'd never want to squash anybody from trying to voice their opinion ever. And the chair or the committee that I chair, I'll hear any bill that comes before us. And so to throw us all into that blanket statement is unfair and not accurate. One of the questions that I have with the bill itself, I mean, if you're wanting to truly take a look at this, why are we just singling out the white-tailed deer farms? You know, we do have a number of farms. We have 2 herds that are moose. They're subject to CWD as well. We also have 11 herds of reindeer in the state of Minnesota. We have 21 herds of red deer and 118 herds of elk. All of them are also susceptible to CWD. I don't understand why we're just singling out the white-tailed deer farms. I do oppose this amendment for all the reasons that were stated here earlier. And I also want to add that I did speak with members at the Board of Animal Health, and they're opposed to this amendment as well. And, you know, they protect the health of domestic animals of the state by statute, Chapter 35, and Cervidae are included in that. And they do go through a stringent testing protocol as well. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The lady from Ramsey, Representative Becker Finn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as I sit here, I am a deer hunter. I have been basically my entire life. And I'm getting text messages from my colleagues who are not hunters who have questions about what it is that we're really talking about here. And what we're talking about is trying to do something to stop the spread of chronic wasting disease. And chronic wasting disease is often tracked back to deer that are on these farms. And so that's what we're talking about here. So increasing the number of deer on farms has nothing to do with the number of deer that are out there for us hunters. That is unrelated issues there. So that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to slow down. I think this is a reasonable amendment. I would like to see it go further, Representative Hamilton, but I think that Representative Hansen was trying to do something that's reasonable here, and I think it's a good thing for hunters for us to look at this, and I'm going to vote green. So thanks.
The gentleman from Waseca, Chairman Cornish.
Mr. Speaker and members, Representative Hansen, yes, we both did come from the farm, but the difference is I didn't move away. I stayed there and I bought the farm, and the pigs still go oink oink and the cows still go moo. You should get back there. And another big difference is I'm not fighting farmers on buffers. I'm not fighting them on ditch mowing. I'm not trying to overregulate Cervidae farms or screw down on them on feedlots. So I think that's another big difference. I still live there. I still support them. If it's going to be the Democratic Farmer Labor Party, you better start living up to the farmer name.
Discussion. The gentleman from Dakota, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I don't think Representative Hamilton asked me to yield, but he did ask some questions. Why white-tailed deer farms? Because of evidence. And the evidence of the deer that was shot by the sharpshooters, that has the ears notched, the area not up north, Representative Lueck, but in the area where the speaker is from, you have chronic wasting disease that the state is responding to spending public money right now. And it's in white-tailed deer. To my knowledge, and I could be wrong, and you could correct me, we haven't in Minnesota, to my knowledge, found it with moose. But in the wild deer population, we have detected chronic wasting disease. Representative Cornish, I'd be happy to stop back down and see you. I think my point is that there's more in common with all of us than what divides us. Now, we may have different opinions, and those opinions are just as valid, regardless of the zip code where we live in. I have deer hunters in my district. I think everybody has deer hunters in their district. So I would ask for a green vote for this amendment for a simple method of containing potential disease.
Discussion. The gentleman from Winona, Chair Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, it's been interesting listening to this conversation, and we see once again an amendment to come forward to put forward more government, more regulation, in search of the false notion that government is going to be a solution, when we know that government many times is the problem. Members, these farms are highly regulated, they're inspected regularly, and they do their job. At the same time, I find it quite ironic, we have a Department of Natural Resources that's out there, and I understand the same individual who, from the DNR, who has been pushing the antler point restriction in southeast Minnesota, that many people are starting to point to the fact has resulted in less deer being harvested in the very areas we're talking about, the CWD zone. So we are developing and have developed at the DNR's leadership, or they have developed policy that is providing for an increased environment for this very same disease we're talking about among the wild population of deer. Well, guess what, members? Those deer aren't inspected. The ones inside the pens are. Government is not the solution, it's a problem. Please vote no on the amendment.
Discussion. The clerk will take the roll on the 822 amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 53 ayes and 80 nays, the amendment is not adopted. There are no more amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 1717, as amended.
Third reading, 1717 as amended. Discussion to the bill. The gentleman from Blue Earth, Representative Johnson C.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I rise in support of this bill. I'm proud to be a member of this committee. I point to the way these bills are coming to us today. You know, a couple of days ago, I complained on this floor about one massive bill that had a lot of policy in it and a lot of financing all in one bill. But look how agriculture does it in the Minnesota House of Representatives. There's a separate policy bill and there's a separate finance bill. So my compliments to the majority for organizing the legislation this way. You're doing it right. Just want to highlight a couple of things that I sat on the committee, the policy committee, since I've been here, and a couple of issues that weren't necessarily, one issue that wasn't that easy and hasn't been discussed, but I think it merits attention. And I think it took a lot of patience on the Representative Anderson's work, but this deals with pesticides for renters and notification of renters. We tried to find a way to notify renters if there's pesticides used in their apartment building. And last year we just weren't able to accomplish that, but work was done and agreements were come to, and now if you're renting an apartment and there's a pesticide that's applied to your apartment, you will know what that pesticide is, what its impact is. That's just good information. It's the kind of transparency that renters need. It's progress, and it's in this bill. I'd like to also highlight another thing in here that just really makes good sense. The MAIL-C, what I call MAIL-C, I got to make sure I get, the Minnesota Ag Education Leadership Council is finally made permanent. I guess they've been on a sunsetted, and we had them on the temporary basis. Boy, they belong in the permanent status, and that's an achievement. Because they do so much to support agricultural education in the state in so many ways, whether it be in our schools, farm business management. they're just a leading group. And, you know, we see the results when the people come testify before the committee. One of the joys of sitting on the Ag Committee is watching the young people come in and give testimony. We're doing some things right, and Mail C has a big part to deal with that. But the parts I want to highlight really are related to some economic issues. And you know, commodity prices are down. It's real clear that it's tough times on the farm. And to be honest with you, I'm always a little surprised how quiet my farmers in my area are, because I know their income's dropped a lot the last couple of years, and there's kind of no end in sight. And we as a legislature have an obligation to make sure that we can support this very vital industry. Representative Cornish, I've just got to say, I take issue with your approach about who can speak for farmers and who does speak for farmers. I'm proud to be a member of the Democratic Farmer Labor Party. I'll tell you, a lot of the reason I'm here is because of agriculture. I spent a lot of time on it. I grew up in a farm state. My wife grew up on a farm, et cetera, et cetera. It's pretty central to who I am, and I'm one of many Democrats across this state that proudly speak up for agriculture. We want to see agriculture and farmers thrive. And we actually see it not only as farmers, but I live in the Mankato area, where we have something we call Green Seam, which recognizes the idea that farming is a lot bigger than just the farmer, him or herself. That there's a lot of services, there's a lot of value-added product, there's a lot of industry associated with farming that certainly makes my region go and makes my community a strong economic area, but it's based on the farm. And I understand that as well as anybody in this room. I really believe that, and I fight hard for that, and I take pride in that, and I will not step aside towards that stance. And Representative Anderson understands that as well, as written in this bill, and indeed the entire Ag Policy Committee. In a bipartisan vote, supported this bill in committee, and I expect we'll have a pretty good bipartisan vote today, too. And there's two areas that I think are really important that fit with addressing the challenges, the economic challenges on the family farm. And again, I work from the basis, when I'm working on ag issues, I'm working from the basis that farmers have to succeed. I also understand the vagaries of the market. It's one of those industries where you're taking a lot. You're taking the weather, and you're taking a market that you can't control. And there's certain things that government can do to help mitigate those challenges, and they are really formidable. And two things in this bill that do that. One is with the Rural Finance Authority, where the land values have skyrocketed. Certainly in my part of the state. And I'll tell you, we could spend all afternoon talking about the dynamics of that market. I'm interested in it, but it does present a challenge, because a farmer may have some value in land, but will not have it can affect some of the support that they can get. The other day we had in the public safety bill, I believe that we recognized that with allowing farmers to access legal services, which made sense. And with the Rural Finance Authority, what this bill does, it does raise the limits on the assets that farmers can have to access those very important loans. We've provided that funding earlier in the year. It was important. It's an important support for farmers. It's when farmers are in trouble that they need those loans to refinance their loans. We can keep farmers on the land by doing this, and that's a good part of the policy bill. The second part is something that we've talked about for the last 4 years, and I think we finally made our progress. And Representative Anderson, I'll give you a lot of personal credit on this, to be honest with you. The Farmer Lender Mediation Act. I know you were interested in changing it, and you listened, and you listened to all parties, and the changes we are making in this bill are really common sense changes. They're modest, very modest. We will still make sure that very important program is available to farmers in many sectors. It's frequently the young farmer, the new farmer, the smaller farmer who hits that instability where they need access to a loan, and the Farmer Lender Mediation Act is going to be extended to this. They will know it's there. The limits have been raised a little bit, but not that much, so that most farmers will still have access to that. It's an improvement. This is your basic ag policy bill. There's a lot of important policy work here that applies to other areas in the Farm Bill, and it's been done well and effectively. I encourage a green vote on this bill.
Discussion. The gentleman from Pope, Chairman Anderson P.
Thank you once again, Mr. Speaker and members. Good discussion today, and This is a fun committee, the Ag Policy Committee, and we got into some issues today that we had a good discussion on, and hopefully we can continue to work together and help the state's agriculture economy, because it's a great part of the state's economy. I think one thing we can all agree on is that we have really good staff here in all the things we do in our committees, and we work hard, but our staff, I think, really works hard. And I just want to say thanks to my CA, Mark Nisley. He can keep things organized, keeps the bills coming in the right order, and he does just an outstanding job. My committee legislative aide, Tyler Webster, also keeps the schedules going right, and I want to thank him as well. Great research staff, nonpartisan, Colby Sullivan and Ken Savory, the DFL lead, and thanks for a lot of cooperation, Representative Bly, in working on these bills and coming up with a compromise that we can all get along with. And also the partisan research staff, Nancy Connolly and Bethany Dorobiala, thank you so much for your work, and just appreciate you being there and providing the research and the background to get things in the right order. I won't go on any longer. I just would sum up by saying we have a great agriculture economy in the state. Just some quick numbers. We're number 1 in turkeys. We're number 3 in hog production, number 6 in cheese and red meat, and number 8 in the nation in milk production. So a strong economy. I think it's 20% of our state's economic engine. Good bill, vote green.
The gentleman from Rice, Representative Bly.
Thank you, Speaker. And Chair Anderson, I apologize for speaking after you. It was a very good speech. If you want to speak after me, that's fine. I do want to say it's been a pleasure to work with you on this committee. You're a very fair chair, and although I do take issue with some of the things that didn't make it into the bill and some of the changes that we weren't able to make, I would speak first about the pollinator language, which the governor had recommended, which had to do with treated seeds, which we did not get into the bill in any form. I contemplated bringing up the discussion again and decided not to do it, and I guess perhaps in some ways this speaks to, when I appreciate Chair Hamilton's comments about we like all kinds of agriculture and we want to make sure we include everything. But sometimes when there's conflict in farmland, it's difficult to say we're all going to, get this done together and speak and do well together. And so I sometimes speak for farmers or ag interests that are not necessarily the same as everyone else thinks of. I don't think that means I'm against farming. In fact, I really strongly support agriculture. I strongly support and feel very strongly about rural economic growth and development. And one of the fears that I have is that with too much growth in the size of certain farms or in certain areas, it makes it harder for economic growth. When you have one farmer doing many acres in the crops that they choose, it shuts out other development and other crops. When you have huge animal unit farms competing against smaller farms, it can close them out and shut them out and make it harder for them to succeed. And I would like to see rural Minnesota grow because there are young people that want to get started in farming and start small farms perhaps and be able to see that we can have an agriculture that can work with the environment in positive ways and develop communities and revive small towns where we've seen them really disappear and almost blow away in the wind because there aren't enough people living out on the land. So those are some things that really concern me, and I struggle with how do we work together to make this kind of rural agriculture and rural economy work. I see some promising things happening, and I'm encouraged by that, but I'm still bothered by it. And in that respect, the issue about the nuisance law, I tried to make the point that some of the concerns come from other farmers. It isn't just people who've moved out from the suburbs and want to live in the country. There are farmers who are affected by the huge CAFO farms coming into their areas and creating a difficult life for them, and perhaps decreasing their property values and things like that. So these are difficult issues. I'm concerned that the lack of the pollinator language, and again, I recognize there's disagreement about this. There are those who use the treated seeds and want to keep using them, and I know that there are those who also believe that market forces will kind of cure this or force people to adjust so that there isn't a problem. I would hope that that were the case, but I don't know that it is. I think when the governor was proposing his concern, which does affect farmers, not only farmers who raise bees, but farmers who rely on bees to pollinate their crops. And that's not all farmers, I acknowledge that. But somehow we have to find a way where we can do that kind of research that satisfies and protects those farmers who feel threatened by the largeness and the engineering, that kind of science that has moved agriculture in that direction, where there are other scientists looking at how we can work more with nature, work more with the environment, and not do things that poison the countryside. So I'm very concerned about that, and I hope that we can continue the discussion. What I've seen too often in the past is that, and I know that some people say, well, they've heard so much that criticizes big agriculture and demeans it, but we also see people that don't want to hear criticism or don't want to look at how we might solve these problems. And I think we need to continue that discussion and go forward with it. But I'm concerned, as I said, about the nuisance law and the lack of the pollinator language, that it could invite a governor's veto. I don't know that. I hope that's not the case, but it does cause me some concern. You have considered many bills in your committee, and we've had fruitful discussions. I don't fault you. And I appreciate your patience and you're willing to work through things. So, one of the big issues I did want to mention with the nuisance lawsuit issue is that there are times when we are in a way protecting absentee owners who are not, as we said, part of the neighborhood. It's hard to negotiate with those people, and it's hard to get them to respect the values and the wishes of their neighbors. So those are just things that that trouble me. I really hope that I can vote for this bill. I won't have much time to think about it, but I am troubled by those things that I've mentioned. I appreciate the time you've given me to speak to this and would welcome any other discussion. Thank you very much.
Discussion. The clerk will take the roll on House File 1717 as amended. The clerk will close the roll. There being 109 ayes and 25 nays, the bill is passed as amended and its title agreed to.